What's going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com. AL.com. Time to talk some SEC hoops as we get ready for the SEC basketball tournament. Alabama playing tonight against Vanderbilt. This segment brought to you by our good friends Andrew Sports Medicine. We thank our sponsors and Mike Rodak. I thank you for joining me from the comfort of your own home as we got Michael Casagrande on the road covering the SEC basketball tournament. So you guys are going to be, I guess, taking turns, whatever this postseason looks like for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But we're getting ready for this first one, second round game for Alabama. They're a 6 seed, Vanderbilt an 11 seed. That game tipping off tonight at 6:30 Central Time in Tampa. But before we get into that matchup, I just want to talk about Alabama specifically. They've had some big wins this season. They have Baylor, Houston, Gonzaga. Those are three of the key wins that you can point to, but also some unfortunate losses throughout the season. So just kind of paint the narrative for us of what this basketball team is all about for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I'd say for people who, maybe followed it a little bit more closely last year when they made their big run, it's definitely a different team. It's a team that lost Herb Jones, and he was not only the SEC Player of the Year last year, but the Defensive Player of the Year. And that really hurt them. I think and even Nate Oates warned a little bit about it going into the year. Like they would need to replace a lot of their defensive energy and defensive production, if you will, from last season. And that hasn't really happened. And so that's predictable in some ways, but the way the season has unfolded has been very unpredictable. So they go in, like you mentioned, they beat Gonzaga and Houston in back-to-back games in December. And I think that really raise the expectations about what this team could do. And then they go in January and they lose at Georgia, which was Georgia's only SEC loss. They went 1-17 in conference play. It was the worst season in SEC history. So that's not a good, blemish for Alabama to have against its record. But then they came right back and they beat Baylor right after that. And they had a pretty good stretch there in February where they were beating teams that they should be beating, and they're kind of settling down a little bit. And then they go into that final week of the season and they lose to Texas A&M and they lose to LSU. And that's sort of the sour taste that they have going into this tournament in Tampa is, what is this team exactly? What team is going to show up? Are they the defensive team that really can clamp down? And they've showed that at sometimes this year. They've had some good defensive games. Or are they the team that's very sloppy on offense and sloppy on defense and can't shoot the ball? We've seen both ends of the spectrum. I don't think there's anybody, including Nate Oates or including the players in the team, that really know for sure what team is going to show up, not only tonight, but if they win tonight, what team's going to show up tomorrow, what team's going to show up next week in the NCAA tournament. And that's, I guess, adding to the intrigue of what could happen this postseason.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. Just with Alabama being that team that when they're on, and when they're not, right? And, when you come into a tournament setting like this, especially up against a Vanderbilt team that they'll tip off with tonight, and I stand corrected, I actually said 7:30. It's 7 p.m. I've seen some contradicting times there, but 7 p.m., that's according to the SEC website, so I'll take that for what it's worth. 7 o'clock tonight in Tampa.
It depends, not to cut in, it depends on what time the game before that ends.
True,
So I think it's
right. So,
25 minutes after.
but if you are wanting to tune into the game, we'll say 7 o'clock. So with that being said, Alabama beat Vanderbilt in their one regular season game against them by 2 points, 74-72. And so again, we talk about this Alabama basketball team and some of the inconsistencies and really the Jekyll and Hyde, not sure who you're going to get. And I certainly think that, especially when you get into this type of tournament play, is really significant. So can this Alabama team get hot and stay hot if they want to make a run at it? That being said, who are some key players in your mind that need to step up, handle their business tonight, and of course, moving forward? And look, Mike, I know we can all point to James Shackelford. He's obviously one guy that is certainly led this team, the best shooter all around for the Crimson Tide. So how important will it be for him to have a good game along with some other key guys?
Will help. I think if he shoots the way that he's shown he can shoot it sometimes this year, which is 5 of 8, 5 of 9 from 3. If he is that sort of game, then they're going to be in pretty good shape. But I think the more bellwether type player is going to be Javon Quinterly, and it's been that way the entire season. Where even Nate Oates said it, I think it was ESPN interview, a couple nights ago, where when he's playing defense and he's locked in and he's trying as hard as he possibly can, that's when they win. That's how they beat Baylor. Is he locked down on James Akinjo, one of Baylor's stars, and played great defense. But then there's been other times this year where he gets very lax and doesn't really play hard on defense, and hasn't shot the ball very well up until the last week or two. And those games are rough. I mean, that's a player who looks a lot different than the SEC tournament MVP that he was last year. So there's a wide range of outcomes for Javon Quinterly in any given game. I do think we've seen a better version of him lately, but in this game, they're absolutely going to need him to be that sort of player, especially with Scottie Pippen Jr. on the other end, who's the SEC's leading scorer. You got to play defense against him. Jaden Shackelford has to play defense too. Keon Ellis, JD Davidson, like that's been, as much as the shooting's been a problem, their shooting has fallen off this year compared to last year. Nate Oates will tell you every single time that their defense has been the bigger problem. And for him, it starts with the guards.
Yeah, and speaking of Pippen Jr., he along with Jordan Wright have made it very clear that Alabama is a beatable team. I should put very beatable team in that, prefacing that. So, I think there's a lot of confidence coming from this Vanderbilt team, which obviously poses well for them. They dominated Georgia, pretty much cleaned up shop with them. Were able to get a pretty easy win over Georgia, 86-51 in the opening round. Now, of course, Alabama getting a bye. And so, they'll be a little bit more fresh, I think, into this one, but certainly some confidence coming from this Vanderbilt team. And Alabama's certainly going to have to play their game. Vanderbilt to me is a team that plays good defense. They're physical, and they'll definitely make you work off the board. So rebounding, I think, is going to be key. Alabama capitalizing on those offensive rebounds, not letting Vanderbilt take advantage of that and get points off turnovers. Alabama, though, they turn the ball over a good bit. So I think that's another concern for me. In your opinion, when you look at these two teams, how they match up, how do you think things shake out with this Vanderbilt team if both teams end up playing some of their best ball?
Yeah, well, I think it helps Vanderbilt that, Georgia was their opponent last night. And as we mentioned before, Georgia just had a historically terrible season, and that team didn't show up last night. And Vandy was up by 30 points pretty quickly, and they were able to kind of rest Scottie Pippen Jr. I think he only played 23 minutes in that game last night, didn't score a whole lot because he wasn't really in the game a whole lot. And that's obviously smart coaching on Jerry Stackhouse's part, because if Vandy's going to go anywhere, they really got to make a run here and win 4 games in 4 days. So their next opponent, and look, I don't think they're wrong. Like if I were them, I'd probably say the same thing. I would want Alabama. Like that's a team that came into Nashville, came into a place that's not a very hostile environment, Memorial Gym. There are a lot of Alabama fans there. You could hear them on the TV broadcast that night. And Vandy still was leading in the first half, I think by 8 or 9 points, and kind of lost that game in the second half when Javon Quinterly came off the bench because he had been benched for the first 7 minutes because Nate Oates was done at that point with his effort. And Quinterly kind of had to save Alabama in that game. So Vandy, I think rightfully so, probably has some confidence. And if we're talking tomorrow or after this game tonight and saying Vandy won the game, would it be all that shocking? No, I think that's the SEC in this season, and just kind of there's a lot of parity in the SEC this year, but also that's just the way Alabama is. And I think if anything, maybe it'll light a fire under Alabama and get them motivated, but I don't think Vandy's wrong in saying what they've said. And I think if they go out there and back it up, then I don't think there's a problem with it.
Yeah. And I think as we kind of go through the narrative of the season, you just don't know which Alabama team you're going to get. And I think that if Alabama can catch fire early in this tournament, I think that will be important for them if they want to try to make a run at it and get out of the second round and continue to potentially, quarterfinals, semifinals, and so on. But with that being said, it's going to be interesting just to see how things shake out and which team shows up tonight. So hopefully, like you said, they'll have a fire under them and they'll be able to kind of motivate and just perform at a very high level, make those shots, obviously play well on defense. So with that being said, Alabama, again, tipping off tonight against Vanderbilt, 7:00 Central Time. Yeah, kind of depending on obviously the game before when that finishes up, but we'll be on the lookout for that. And of course, we'll be with you at post game whenever that game wraps up to kind of break down the game, break down the comments from the game. And right, Mike, I appreciate your insight as always, and enjoy the game. Everyone out there, enjoy the game. And again, thank you to our sponsor, Andrew Sports Medicine.